I don't want to log into another ROTC account. I had so much trouble doing it yesterday.
Well, the rest of us are not 87 years old like you are, Keith. So
that's very true.
True. I am extremely old, especially after last night. I aged 80 years.
So the rest of us are only in our 60s, Keith.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Chandler's burping. We got to stop all unnecessary conversations.
Chandler sounded like he almost threw up onto his camera.
It is now time. It is now time. Gentlemen, I said stop all unnecessary conversations. You have failed this group already. All of you are demoted from starter status to bench warmers. You're all suspended for the opening weekend of Running Out the Clock 2019. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Against our finer points of wisdom, we have decided to talk about college football again.
Oh, God. A terrible idea.
The world's worst sport, and we are the worst proponents of it. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. That down there is not a Florida fan known as Keith Harkins. And as always, we have the one, the only, Crambler Bling Bong. Crambler, how are you?
I am great. I'm coming at you live from the trunk of my car on the top of literal Rocky Top.
Little baby top.
The Running Out the Clock mobile studios has moved to Northeast Tennessee, and so until I actually have a house, I will be rooming with Jeremy Pruitt on the top of Rocky Top.
Really nice of him to let you stay there.
We've already gotten into a fight.
Let's not act like Jeremy Pruitt owns his own place. He's renting.
He's not even renting. He's just homeless.
He just has a tent on Rocky Top.
He's definitely at one of those extended stay motels.
Yeah, that's all it really is.
For 3 years until Tennessee fires the coach.
I did mention we have Keith Harkins here. Keith disavowed all association with the University of Florida after week 0 matchup against Miami. Keith, how you feeling?
Well, it happened earlier than usual this year. Usually it's week 3.
Oh, man. All right. We are here at the beginning of the season. This is our first full episode of the year. I've got a 50-pound dog who decided to climb into my lap for the first time in months, and I don't know what to do with her. And we've got SEC football that we're being forced to talk about. But as we always start off every episode here on Running Out the Clock, our big main episodes, we got to talk about the Noles first and foremost, gentlemen. Florida State Criminals 2019 edition. Here's the big question. How long is it going to take before everybody gets fired? Chandler?
However many games they play this season, probably about half of those. So 6, I don't know. I have a theory as to a particular coach currently residing in Los Angeles who is waiting to take another major Power 5 job. And I think several schools are going to try to fire their coaches early as possible.
Who is that?
His character,
Tyronn Lue, I think.
His character rebuilding effort began last night or yesterday on game day, and that is of course one urban character counts Meyer. So Florida State's going to get in that sweepstakes, absolutely.
He was in the orange and blue last night, hanging out with the old ball coach.
Well,
the old ball coach who looked miserable late in the game.
God, but he represented all of us last night.
Everybody's getting fired.
Everybody getting fired. I also like that you said however many games they played this season, as if there's a chance that they're going to get to about 4 games and just stop. You know what? Actually,
there's a solid chance of that.
They might.
Keith, how about you?
Yeah. I mean, realistically, they'll probably last the season. Things have to go just terrible for them to fire a coach mid-season in his second year. That being said, they missed the playoffs the bowl season for the first time in 37 years last year. So,
right. So there's always that chance.
Yeah, I feel like your chances of getting fired in your second season go up dramatically when you make history in the worst way possible.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tricky situation down there. They've got the last remaining like influx of talent from Jimbo Fisher's time, which isn't accounting to much. There's a reason Jimbo Fisher jumped ship, and it was not
Which is
just
not
the big
offensive
bucks.
lineman.
Yeah, it was not just the huge amount of money that A&M offered him, although that helps. But there's a reason Jimbo was leaving. But they do have, the last remaining bit of talent there, like, Cam Akers and all of that they're trying really hard to not waste the last year or so that the players are there. And it's kind of
just Cam Akers.
That's actually, he's the only one that comes to mind. I think he's the only one that's notable. Doesn't matter. This is supposed to be, for better or worse, an SEC podcast. So I guess we got to talk about the SEC now. Sticking in the state of Florida, of course, we did have, and I'm sorry we have to talk about this, Keith, but we did have the week 0 opening evening matchup between the number 8 preseason Florida Gators and the number 0 preseason Miami Hurricanes. A absolute disaster of a matchup. A clumsy game that had everyone asking, were these teams actually ready to start the year? Because it didn't seem like it. And that was and that was promptly followed up by Hawaii and Arizona, which was another turnover fest as well, which was a lot of fun. So week 0, man, off to a great start. But that Florida-Miami game, what's your immediate impression? Chandler, we'll start with you here. In what was an awkward game, what's your immediate impression about, those two teams, but obviously the Florida Gators, and whether you think that this is indicative of the rest of the season, or is it just kind of opening weekend type of stuff?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that Florida, Florida is, it's year 2 of Dan Mullen down there.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. Don Merlins. I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name.
I know him.
Please forgive me. It's year 2 down there. I think you knew that the offensive line was going to be a sticking point. And, statistically, Felipe Franks had a decent game, but it just looked like there were times where he was completely lost out there. And so, and the other thing that's concerning is week 0 or not, there was absolutely no discipline on defense. And some of that stuff gets cleaned up throughout the course of the year, I'm sure, but they would have blown out Miami had it not been for so many stupid penalties that came and never really stopped. Even down to the final drives of the game where Miami is kind of trying to get into scoring position, and they just continue. They just outright are tackling receivers.
Yeah,
right.
For CJ
guys,
Henderson murders a man on the field.
Right. And it was for balls that were underthrown. It was for passes that weren't catchable.
It was for 4th and 32.
Yeah.
Where like even if he had caught it, he was like 25 yards.
Right. Right. Although you never know. Speaking from personal experience, you never know he's going to catch that ball and just throw it behind him for, the other side of the field. But I also
because
think,
you did that in a game. Is that what you mean by personal experience?
I personally did that in a game.
Yeah, good for you, man.
There was never a game that I watched where that happened live. No, and I think on the flip side, I think if you're Miami, you're frustrated that you lost. But I think also you're looking at Manny Diaz and thinking, okay, I think we've got the right guy. We just have to give him maybe a year or two to get some offensive line there, develop the ones that were there, because considering how outmatched they were on the line, they gave up 10 sacks and they still were in the game until 30 seconds left or a minute left or however much it was. So I think you're encouraged by what you saw. You're obviously frustrated you lost, but you're encouraged by what you saw and feel like maybe Diaz can do some things that Mark Richt probably wasn't going to be able to do there.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of my biggest takeaway of all of it was Diaz as his debut as that head coach there. And what he was actually going to bring to Miami, knowing full well that Miami is not necessarily in the best shape as far as the personnel that they have, the recruiting that they've been able to do over the past few seasons, that sort of thing. So, absolutely, that was a huge takeaway. Keith, on the flip side of that, okay, we talked a little bit about some of the frustrating things. There were some positives. Chandler mentioned the huge amount of sacks, another dominant performance, early season performance from like Jabari Zuniga. Who is a returning pass rusher extraordinaire for the Gators. I mean, what are some of the positives that came out of that game?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of concern about Florida's pass rush ability this year because they lost CC Jefferson and Zabari or Ja'Kai Polite, and they also lost Vojan Joseph, and those were three very talented edge rushers. And so, like they got Zuniga back, but there's a lot of questions about, can they replace that production? And so they got the Louisville transfer, Jonathan Grinard, and he had a sack and a half last night and 2 tackles for a loss. Zuniga had 1.5 sacks and 3 tackles for a loss. Like they were in their face the entire night. Granted, Miami's offensive line is really awful, but I think that was exposed a little bit because Florida's front seven is actually still that good at rushing the passer. Like you said, 10 sacks, 16 tackles for a loss. Like it seemed like they were under pressure every drop back. And so that's a positive to take away from it. Also, Felipe Franks, about half of his snaps, he looked like the Felipe Franks from the end of last year. And the other half looked like the Felipe Franks from the Georgia game and the Missouri game. So you aren't really sure what to take away from that,
My favorite moment from the game was when I texted you guys, wow, it looks like Felipe Franks has regressed, and then he drops back and throws a beautiful, beautiful deep ball, and then on the next play scores. Like, okay, never mind.
Yeah, and then and then I think like the series after that, he fumbles a read option pass. Like, so like that's kind of how it was. It was super up and down for him. He did throw for 254 and 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions. At the worst possible moments. You can fault him for that last interception because it was a terrible pass, but also the fault there is mostly going to be with old Dern because why are you passing the ball after a turnover on downs before the game? Like, that's awful play calling. Like, I get that. I get that you're maybe trying to outsmart the defense because they're expecting you to chew up the clock, but like, when your quarterback's been up and down all game, like maybe take some pressure off of him and just let your talented running backs do their work. Speaking of which, they only had 52 yards rushing, so that's an area of concern.
Not ideal, ideal at all. Yeah, it was weird, and one of the weirdest things to me in all of it. Is that, I mean, you mentioned the pass rushing, obviously, how it felt like Miami seemed to be always under pressure. I mean, that's what you get with a Todd Grantham defense. Like, that's what he's going to do, is he's always going to blitz all the time. And what's so weird about it is that, like, it's when you play like that, when it works, like it works. And when it doesn't, you have what you had last night where it's like, things are going south. But what's so interesting to me about it is the fact that, like, it would have probably looked significantly better as a defense if the linebackers had wrapped up and tackled on all of those times that they just weren't, like there's no excusing all the pass interference, especially the late game pass interference that happened. But I think that's so interesting is that like the fact that that main thing happened with the missing tackles and everything, it just made the defense look like a much worse unit than they probably actually are. But who knows? That might be an issue all season.
Yeah, two of Miami's long touchdown plays came off of, really, even Florida's first touchdown was just a result of everybody just suddenly forgetting how to form tackle. Like, like it honestly didn't even look like most of them were trying. They were just kind of running up to them and shoulder bumping them and then falling over.
Yeah,
it was ugly.
It was high school nonsense is what it looked like, man. So here's the question then. We look at this and we see all the inconsistencies. We see Felipe sometimes being great and sometimes being terrible. And we see the defense getting a bunch of sacks, but also making some dumb moves or missing a lot of tackles. We see all of that happen. The question is, what's the type of stuff that you think gets fixed? And what's the type of stuff that you think lingers? It's impossible to tell anything after the very first game of the entire season. But if we had to completely overreact, because that's what you do when you talk about sports, what do you see as something that can be fixed and something that's not, that's going to be more of an issue, you think, if you had to predict it for the rest of the season, Chandler?
I think that the defensive stuff gets cleaned up. I think those defensive players are all, I mean, to a man, too good to not clean that up.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't a lot of the secondary players like fairly new, Keith? Or
the two corners are not. They're basically like all American corners. It's the safeties and like the nickel that are that are either completely new or playing like a new position.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think they'll get that cleaned up. They're too good of a defense to not do that. And a lot of the scheme is going to continue to be really boom or bust, but it'll boom a lot more than it'll bust. So I think they're fine there. If I were a Florida fan, and as we all know that Keith is not a Florida fan, but if I were, I'd be really worried about that offensive line because it is young and there's a lot of that stuff that comes with just experience that you can't get. So even if they're talented young players that still have to face Georgia and I don't know. I'm not sure who all they play. I mean,
Auburn this year.
Yeah, Auburn.
That's a really good front seven.
Yikes.
Do they play LSU every year?
Yep.
Yeah, so they've got some tough front sevens coming up that I don't know that Franks is the kind of quarterback that can really handle that, and so I'd be really concerned about that offensive line.
I get that. Keith, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the two easiest things to fix are going to be the tackling and like the really bad penalties where like, all those pass interferences or like the personal fouls. And like, that's all like week 0. It's a rivalry game. That's not really a rivalry that like they're trying to bring back. So there's a lot of emotion. Some of the players were new and trying to prove themselves. So it was just going to be like a recipe for a lot of that stuff to happen. And it happened. And I agree with Chandler. Like the offensive line was a question mark going in and everybody knew that. And everybody knew that it was for good reason. I think the only hope that maybe that was a little overstated was some of the offensive linemen are not like freshmen. They're sophomores or like redshirt juniors that have played a little bit but haven't really started a whole lot. So maybe them being around for a little bit would kind of help accelerate them kind of getting ready. And I mean, Miami's got a really good front seven. And so that didn't help at all. But, it's the SEC, it's like the land of good front sevens. So that's going to be something to watch. And I think Felipe Franks going forward is going to have to continue proving himself because, again, half the plays he was great, half the plays he was really bad. And he kind of got unsettled in the pocket a lot last night and, just made poor decisions. So you can't have that going forward for sure.
You see, I kind of feel like maybe I'm definitely in the minority on the podcast here, obviously, but I kind of feel like I'm in the minority in some of the assumptions there. When it comes to if there's two things I know about old Don Merlin's teams, it's that A, I hope he fails in everything he does for the rest of his life, and B,
agreed.
It's that I'm never going to be terribly concerned about the offense getting cleaned up as the season goes. And I mean that for both Franks. I think he will calm down a bit. He's a little bit, as we could tell in kind of his behaviors, he's a bit of a wild card of a personality. But
as Hertford pointed out like 16 times last night.
That being said, I do. You mean obviously Mullen has the reputation for being a quarterback developer, and we saw it with Frank's last season. But at the same time, it's easy to forget that he brought over one of the better offensive line coaches in John Hevesy when he left Mississippi State, a guy who was routinely developing a lot of raw line prospects and making them, really, really productive players for that scheme in particular. So that's one of those things. I feel like the line can only get better from what they demonstrated. But I feel like that's one of the things I do. I would say that Florida I would not be too worried about going forward. I'd be more worried about all the missed tackles in particular as being something that I just don't know if that scheme, the Grantham blitz all the time scheme, also just Grantham as a coach, if he's going to be the type of guy that develops that aspect of his players the way that he should. Because I feel like that was an issue as well before he went to Florida. So.
Yeah, I actually thought that the offensive line was decent in their pass protection. I thought they were better than maybe I thought they were going to be. It was their run blocking that was just awful, which is to be expected from basically a brand new offensive line.
That's true. That's very true. So the Gators were the ones that kicked things off for us, but we've got a huge amount of action coming up this next weekend, the actual first weekend of college football, not this Bush League first week nonsense they try to push on us with stuff like Youngstown State and Samford. I actually had that game on just for background noise, and it was so uninteresting as background noise that I muted it because I couldn't even deal with that. It was bad. Anyway, so that being said, okay, this is where we actually get to see all of the SEC teams in action. With that, a few of them made it into the preseason polls, and I know none of us are big preseason polls fans. I don't think any of us really feel like preseason polls are accurate, worthwhile predictors of anything necessarily, but it does give you an idea of what people think of teams coming into the season. And there's a handful of SEC teams that made the AP preseason top 25. Alabama at number 2, Georgia at number 3, LSU at number 6, Florida at number 8, Texas A&M at number 12, and Auburn at number 16. Who makes sense there, Chandler, and who just does not make any sense to you?
Alabama and Georgia obviously make sense. LSU, I don't know, man. The other teams there, LSU at 6, Florida at 8, A&M at 12. I don't think any of those teams are that good, but I don't, I don't know who else you put there.
Right. That's the major deciding factor there.
Because look at LSU's schedule. You know exactly what LSU is going to do this year. They're going to win 10 games. They're going to build up the LSU Alabama game to be this epic blockbuster of a game that won't be competitive, and they'll lose another game that maybe they shouldn't. Maybe Florida beats them or something. I don't know.
Right.
And
I would say they definitely lose at least one game that they should not lose, because that's what they do. Look at A&M last year.
Right. And A&M's just not there yet. But again, 6, 8, 12. I don't know who else you put there. I think the team that is overrated going into the season is Auburn. I think Auburn is ripe for a disaster season. I think when we're doing this show this time next year, we're talking about, Urban Meyer, head coach at Auburn.
Yeah, exactly.
He's
going to be it's going to be difficult on him coaching both Auburn and Florida State at the same time. But if anyone can handle the stress, it's Urban Meyer.
Well, don't forget about USC as well. And potentially one or two other schools.
Yeah, he's definitely not going to have a health issue like 4 seasons in.
I've even worked out a scenario in my mind where he is also coaching LSU next season. So
okay.
We're going to
is that because
later
because Ed Orgeron actually wins the Democratic national or the nomination for president and becomes a presidential candidate?
Yes,
I actually would prefer that scenario.
I'd vote. He'd get my vote. He'd absolutely get my vote.
Same, absolutely same. But Auburn. But like I said, I think Auburn is just their defense is still really good, but their offense is just not produced the way that they need to. They're trying out a true freshman to start at quarterback, and their schedule is brutal. Their schedule is is unbelievable. And so, by the time they get to say the Ole Miss game, Gus may not even be coaching them at that point. And so, and the thing about Auburn is when Auburn quits. And I don't know, man. I see that as a possibility this season. And as close as he came to getting fired last year, I don't know. I just don't see that being something that warrants a top 25 ranking.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about Auburn. They are just, but I mean, even besides like the freshman quarterback things, all that, like you look at their defense, and their defense even is like a stellar defensive line, but a lot of question marks at linebacker. They have still a lot of unproven, players on the defense as a whole. Let's
run down their schedule real quick.
Mm-hmm.
They open with Oregon Saturday at 7:30, so that's a tough game. Then they got Tulane and Kent State, both in Auburn. Then they go to Texas A&M. They host Mississippi State. They go to Florida. They go to Arkansas. They go to LSU. There is a bye week in there, and then they play Ole Miss. Then they got to play Georgia, and then Sanford, and then Alabama.
Right.
And so, I mean, like it is possible. Now it won't go this way because it never goes this way, but it's possible that they have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losses going into November.
Right.
Now they won't lose all the toss-ups, but in the SEC West, that if you go into November with more than one loss, then you're out of the hunt.
Yeah. And
I don't know that Auburn is okay with being out of the hunt at this point.
No, they're demanding more. They absolutely are demanding more.
Right.
And and not even to mention the fact that with the polls, and this is my biggest thing with it, is that the LSU, like the fact, okay, LSU's probably ranked too high, but LSU had a shockingly good season last year, and the thing about it is that LSU, Florida A&M all at least had seasons last year that warrant getting some acclaim coming into this year, right? Mm-hmm. Like Florida, was a 10-win season team. LSU was a 10-win team. A&M finished second in the SEC West. What did Auburn do last year that warrants a number 16 ranking? They were bottom half of the West, 3 conference victories, 8-5 overall. I just wonder about that. But Keith, what about you when you look at the listing? I mean, you kind of agree with what we're saying, or you got any other ideas there?
Yeah. I don't know how you rank Alabama and Georgia any different. I think LSU's a top 10 team. I think Florida's a top 15 team. Auburn probably fine putting them in the top 25, but again, like their offense is probably going to be worse this year than it was last year, and it was terrible last year. And like you said, they've got questions in their back seven. So, I don't know what you do with that, but everybody who writes anything about college football loves Auburn for some reason, and I can't figure it out.
No, almost always. I don't know. It's weird. And I mean, we could be talking about in a couple of weeks that, like, what's his name? Bo Nix, right? That's the guy's name.
Yeah.
That Nix proves us wrong and is ready, and there's a reason he was named the starter. But
that's very true. And I mean, he's a talented young quarterback for sure. But
yeah,
I was listening to Jay Tate, who or maybe somebody who had talked to Jay Tate, who he runs the Auburn rival site.
Okay.
And he said that he hinted that there was some dissension in the locker room, that they felt like Joey Gatewood had kind of earned the starting role, and
I saw that.
And so there's just it's a divided locker room. And so when you've got a divided locker room and a coach on the ropes, I mean, it's just all the recipe for a major disaster are there.
Right.
But at the same time, all the recipe for an Auburn national championship are there too.
Yeah.
So
because this is the type of season in which teams like Auburn shine. Like, it's when all of a sudden Auburn is, questionable, and in which they can actually step up and rise. It's when Auburn's like look at last year where it was like, oh, well, Auburn returns maybe the like second best quarterback in the SEC and Jarrett Stidham. And
they had beaten Alabama the year before.
Yeah, and Georgia. Remember? I mean, they beat Alabama and Georgia, and then Stidham comes out and is just unimpressive, and they ran him a lot.
Yeah.
Why did they run him so much? He is a statue of a human being.
Gus gonna Gus.
Gus gonna Gus. So I guess we need to talk about the conference as a whole here and talk about kind of our standings, where we think teams will actually end up, our predictions in that regard. But I want you guys to consider two things as well as we talk about our standing predictions. I want you to maybe see if you could predict a surprise team of the season, kind of like how LSU or Kentucky were last year. If you see a team in the SEC this year that could do better than expected, and along with that, maybe a team that you think is ripe for a collapse, a season like, I don't know if you would call Auburn last season a collapse, but Auburn was supposed to be better than a 3-5 in the conference type of team,
right?
And that's where they ended up. So something like that. Those are two extra things I would like you guys to consider as we talk about the standings. Last year, of course, saw the Georgia Bulldogs, the only team that we did not get around to making our preview episode for. We apologize, Georgia fans. Scheduling conflicts got in the way, and we just never worked that one out. But Georgia, and Alabama being tops of the two divisions in the conference. Kentucky and A&M kind of being surprising second-place teams, especially A&M, who didn't earn second place until the last week of the regular season in that insane game against LSU. If they had lost that, they would have been fourth place, which is so weird to me. Florida and LSU in third place. South Carolina and Mississippi State in fourth. Missouri and Auburn in fifth, Vandy and Ole Miss in sixth, and Tennessee and Arkansas in seventh place in the respective divisions. Guys, let's talk about the divisions this year. What are we thinking here? Who do you think actually, takes the cake in the East and the West? Where do we want to start? What division we want to start in? Or do we want to go last place up to first place in both divisions?
Either way.
All right, let's just pick a division then. Let's pick a division. Since the West already has Florida that played, that means the East already has Florida that played. The East goes first here. Let's talk through the SEC East this year. Chandler, let's start with you, man. You think Georgia takes it again, or you think someone pulls out the victory?
I think if anybody was going to sneak up on Georgia, it was going to be Florida, and I don't think that offensive line is going to be able to do it. So I feel pretty confident in saying that Georgia is going to win the East relatively easily.
Yeah, you look at the rest of the East right now, and Kentucky obviously was the second place team last season. They lost so many of the players, especially those defensive players that made them what they were. Florida could have some issues. South Carolina, you just never freaking know with at any point in time. So it's like there's more question marks. Georgia continues to kind of be like the I don't know, kind of the stalwart, the team that you can actually expect, okay, they're probably just going to continue to be good in the East. And the other ones are a little bit more iffy. Keith, you think Georgia takes the top place as well, or you think someone else has the case there?
No, I think it's Georgia, and then like 10 spots later you get to like Florida, and then I think in the East, if anyone's going to kind of make that jump that like Kentucky did last year, I hate saying it, but probably Tennessee and maybe Missouri. Missouri has, Kelly Bryant, and he's a proven winner, and they got talented wide receivers, and they got a decent defense, and like things could strike right, and they make a jump. Tennessee, like they were better last year than I think we all gave them credit for.
They were last in the SEC East, though.
Sure, but like they had a lot of really competitive games, though. I thought that they played better than I thought they would.
Who did they actually beat? I'm pulling up their schedule from
They
last
beat
season.
Auburn.
Sure, yeah. Just kind of in general. I'm trying to remember if they beat anyone else. They beat Auburn for sure. Well, they beat Kentucky.
Yeah.
Those were their two
Right.
conference victories.
They beat Kentucky. They were really competitive against Alabama till like midway through like the third quarter, which isn't saying a whole lot because
That's what Bama does.
right, but like there's talent there, and they're getting to the point to where you start making those strides, or you go into another rebuild, which they've gone through now like 10 times. So, I don't think Kentucky is going to be anywhere near where they were last year. I think they lost too much. And so I think you've got like Georgia, Florida, and then a grouping of 3 teams. And then I think you'll have Kentucky and like Vanderbilt near the bottom again this year.
All right. Let's run down our East standings here. Chandler, who else do you have behind Georgia?
I don't know who to put there. I'm kind of with Keith. Well, I don't know if I'm with Keith because Tennessee sucked last year, and I think they're going to suck again this year. They may not suck quite as much, but Georgia's at the top. Missouri is getting a lot of love from, quote, football people, and I just don't get it. Like Kelly Bryant, I just never was impressed with Kelly Bryant. While he was at Clemson, I mean, I know he won, but in a lot of ways that felt like Clemson won kind of in spite of him, not because of him. And that's probably not a fair thing to say because you don't keep the job if you don't keep the job if you're not doing something right.
Yeah.
But I just don't.
And kind of along with that, like Bryant is just not your style of quarterback either. Like you are a big fan of the gunslingers,
right?
And he's definitely not that at all.
Right. And I don't know how that kind of quarterback really works in the SEC. But I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of questions there, but apparently people like them a lot. So, I think that second place spot is going to go to either Missouri or Florida. Then after yesterday, I guess I would say Missouri just by default, even though I don't believe in them. I don't really believe in Florida's offensive line either. So I'll say Georgia, Missouri, Florida, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. I think would be the order that I would ultimately end up deciding. Normally I put some thought into that, but I'm just looking at the teams because I forgot Missouri was in the SEC until like 5 minutes ago.
Everybody does every year.
Yep. Totally respect that. Totally respect that.
Being from the southeastern part of the country. And
yeah.
And the other thing that I think is going to be an issue for Missouri is how do they play when if their appeal for their bowl ban doesn't hold up and they stay bowl banned, how does that affect them kind of psychologically, because you could easily see a team just kind of fold and quit if that happens. I'm not saying that they will, but that's something that you can easily deal with if something like that does hold up. So but yeah, I mean, I guess Missouri second by default.
All right, Keith, who you got in the rest of your rundown?
Yeah, so Georgia first for sure. I just think Florida gets a lot better than they showed last night. Like they were awful and did a lot of things wrong and still found a way to win the game, which isn't nothing. Missouri, I would say third. They've got a pretty easy schedule. All their hard games are at the end of the year, and so they could go into like the start of their like SEC schedule 5-0, and that's important. And After Missouri, I would put South Carolina there, and then honestly, you can probably switch Kentucky and Tennessee at that 5 and 6 spot, and then Vanderbilt last.
So what you putting Kentucky at fifth?
At second to last or third to last, yeah. I would just say second to last, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just trying to keep it in our records here. So you're going Tennessee, then Kentucky, then Vandy to round out the East standings.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, because you did that, you and I actually came up with the exact same East standings. So thanks a lot, Keith, making me look like
consistency.
Yep, dab on them. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think Florida gets better. I still don't think Florida actually like challenges Georgia necessarily.
Oh no.
I think that there is like a 2-game gap between Georgia and Florida when it comes to the standings.
Yeah.
But I do think that Florida ends up having the slightly better. I'm with you. We'll put Missouri there mostly because the schedule's a little bit easier and because last season I was higher on South Carolina than I was pretty high on South Carolina, and they were just so underwhelming that I don't want to trust them this season, so I'm not going to. So I'm putting Missouri there. Two things about that is I'm with Missouri, and this is kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, Chandler. I get worried about Kelly Bryant at Missouri mostly because I don't know how he fits in a Derek Dooley offense after seeing Drew Lock do so well as a long ball vertical passing type of quarterback, which Bryant is not. So that worries me some. But I actually see the fact that the appeal has not actually been like thrown out yet, because I don't think it still has. I think the NCAA is still reviewing the appeal, quote unquote, which is BS. I think that actually kind of helps motivate Missouri a bit to kind of try and get back at the NCAA while the appeal drags on. I think it could. That being said, I'm sure that the complete opposite will happen and they'll lose all motivation and crash and burn because I said it and now they have to prove me wrong.
Speak it into existence.
Exactly. But I see South Carolina, but honestly think that this could be a year in which kind of how the West was last year, where like it came the top or like 2, 3, and 4 really were kind of up in the air until like at the last week of the season between where LSU, A&M, and Mississippi State would actually finish. I think that sort of situation could happen between Florida, Missouri, South Carolina, but more so Missouri, South Carolina. And then I think Tennessee, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt to round it out. So those are my picks as well. We forgot to mention until now that we are supposed to have Roe Hunter on the podcast, but he bailed like 20 minutes before we hit record. So we don't have his picks. So we'll have to get those later on, I guess.
He did.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, he did to us.
He is officially on review for next week.
Oh, already. The commissioner has spoken.
Our first one.
Keith has the right to do that because Keith actually won the predictions game on the podcast last season. So he's got the right to. He's now the king of the podcast.
Special guest commish.
All right, let's go to the West real quick and get our standings there. Chandler, Keith, do we all pretty much just say Alabama again at the top spot?
I mean, it's going to be them until somebody like definitively proves us wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which will be when Nick Saban, if he ever does retire. I mean, that's pretty much it. So
he's going to die on the field for sure.
Yep. Chandler, how about behind them? What do you think happens?
I'll say I'll go LSU, then A&M, then State, then Auburn, then Ole Miss, then Arkansas.
So not super different than last season. The only switches really being that LSU finishes in second place instead of Texas A&M.
Right, and I think A&M is getting closer. I don't think A&M is quite there yet. I think that I know State had a deep and talented defense last year. I think they have a deep but significantly less talented defense, and that's not necessarily a slight on them. It's just any team outside of Alabama who loses 3 first-round picks is significantly less talented.
Exactly.
I think State has got some really good young players. They've got some freshmen that will play a good bit. That will be, in 2 or 3 years, household names, but they're not there yet. A lot of questions with wide receivers for me. I think LSU is still the most well-rounded team besides Alabama. And, we've already discussed Auburn and what could happen there. And I think Arkansas is still just a step or two behind Ole Miss in the rebuild process. And their big problem is Chad Morris is trying to build a team that is completely against the identity of the team of what Burt always did there. And so I still don't think that he really has
he's working with so much that is not his thing at all.
Right. And I think they've got a decent front seven. Hang on. Did I just lose you guys?
No, we still got you.
Sorry, I got a FaceTime call real quick.
All good.
So anyway, I think they've got a decent front seven, but I still don't think that they're there. So that would be my order.
All right, Keith, what about you?
Being a person that loves spicy takes and changing everything up, I'm going to agree with Chandler completely. And the only curveball here for me is that I think State could be a little bit better than people think they might be. I mean, it's hard to replace that talent and production on the defensive side of the ball, as well as, the all-time leading SEC quarterback rusher and Nick Fitzgerald. Like that's a lot of talent to replace. The good news is that, Joe Moorhead's offense last year struggled a lot with the Dan Mullen personnel, and so he's got more of his players in. He got a transfer quarterback in from Penn State, and so I think there's a chance that the offense is going to work a little bit better this year. Also helps that you have Kyrie Hill coming back. He's extremely talented. Kylan Hill, sorry.
Right.
And LSU is installing a whole different offense than what we've seen for like the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So that could be last year we talked about LSU could potentially like spiral out of control and just crash and burn last year. And I think that's a little more apt this year than it was last year. Like when you install a whole new offense with, noted and elite rushing quarterback Joe Burrows.
Yeah.
So I would say the same as Chandler, but don't be surprised if like LSU finishes as low as 4th and State maybe slips or jumps ahead of them.
Yeah, you see, I'm with you. It's weird that LSU is going to be doing such an offensive revamping this season. And I was thinking about it earlier today. Like I know we make a lot of jokes about Joe Burrow, but I do got to give him some credit here. Like he's not a good like quarterback, but he's a good college football player. Mm-hmm. He just
he's decent at running the ball. He's just
he's just one of those guys. He's your classic college football player, which is like kind of a throwback to like the 90s quarterback, which was like throw for 1,700 yards and rush for like 600,
Right. Yep.
Is that he kind of reminds me of that a little bit. So like, I don't know if that's going to work or not. LSU, I picked them. I'm with you guys pretty much all the way. LSU, I put them at 2nd. My heart tells me not to, because my heart tells me that the fact that we think they're going to do well this season is why they're going to collapse this year, because that's what they do. They're LSU. They never do what you think they're going to do. I I'm going to put Mississippi State at third. I think Mississippi State does the exact same as last season, pretty much as far as like record goes. I think that they're just like a 7-8 win team. I don't see. I kind of said it when we did our Mississippi State preview, but I think they're a team that pretty much does the same, but it looks better. So like you see the team improving, you see the team catching on to Moorhead's offense, but it's pretty much the exact same season as last season. I think though it differentiates them from A&M possibly, and this is basically hinges on the idea that A&M is not quite as together as we think they are. A&M has some worse matchups on their schedule. In particular, A&M has to play Georgia this season.
Oops.
So there, and Mississippi State has a relatively lighter SEC schedule. You know, Kentucky will probably come down to reality this year. If Auburn is, overrated, the Mississippi State has a chance to beat them as well. Like there's Auburn and Mississippi State is a toss up again. Mississippi State beat A&M last season. It's a different matchup this year, obviously, in a different location. But, if A&M is more of what they were last year, there's always that chance. So it's a little bit friendlier. So I think that's why you could see Mississippi State. Basically, I think that Mississippi State and A&M, they end 3-4, and it's entirely determined on who wins their head-to-head matchup.
Right.
And that's it.
That makes sense.
That's it. But, yeah, Auburn, Ole Miss, Arkansas to round things out. So here's the question then, and then we'll get to our actual week predictions. Chandler, do you have anyone that you see being I feel like we didn't really talk about a surprise, but if you were to pick a team here that could be a surprise team and a team that could be a collapse team, who would you pick?
I mean, collapse, I'm still going Auburn. Surprise is a relative term, I think, because I don't think anybody is going to surprise us and beat Alabama.
Right.
And win the West. I don't think anybody's going to surprise us to beat Georgia and win the East.
Sure, but like, who's going to be the LSU or Kentucky?
So I think, and I mean, I feel bad saying it because it's homerism, but I do think that Ole Miss has got, but I think they've got potential to be kind of in that 6-6 or 7-5 range when everybody expects them to be 3-9, 4-8. I think their running backs are really talented. I think Matt Corral is a good quarterback who is a redshirt freshman, but I also think that just kind of with the way the schedule shakes out, if they can win their 4 non-conference games and beat Arkansas, then all of a sudden you're talking about, okay, all you got to do is get a win against Vanderbilt, who's probably going to be bad, or pull an upset in the Egg Bowl, which is not likely, but is certainly not unheard of. So
sure.
I think that they're in a position to do that because I think Ole Miss. I say that because I think Ole Miss getting to like the Compass Bowl in Birmingham, if that's even what it's still called, that is a surprise. And
BBVA Bowl,
right.
Is that it? Yeah.
And
It's
pretty
actually
much
the AAF Bowl.
Oh, rest in peace. This is for you, AAF.
But
The RIP AAF Bowl.
But I think anybody else, like if A&M comes, finishes second, or LSU finishes second, or even State finishes second, like I don't think that's a huge surprise for anybody. I mean, because that's just kind of the way that it's gone the last few years.
Yeah, if Mississippi State finishes second, it's entirely because LSU and A&M don't do as well as they should. And like that would be the surprise.
Let me reframe that prediction and say not necessarily Ole Miss, but the winner of the Arkansas Ole Miss game, because the team that wins that game has a path to 6 or 7 wins.
I like that.
And I think either one of those teams winning 6 or 7 games is going to be a surprise.
I like that. I like that a lot. Keith, how about you? You have someone that you see as a surprise or a potential collapse team?
Yeah, I would say that the surprise would be State for me, just because a lot of people are down on them, and rightfully so because of the reasons that we mentioned earlier. And then my collapse would be LSU for reasons that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, Keith, I'm going to agree with you on the collapse team. I think mostly because I don't know ever what to do with Louisiana State University Fighting Tigers, that they're going to be my potential collapse team because they should be good by all accounts. So they probably won't, That being said, I still think we're going to see like a phenomenal year out of guys like Grant Delpit, who I learned today. I kept trying to say his last name is Delpit, make it sound more like fancier, but
French, man.
Yeah, but apparently like most people just call it Delpit, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
That's unfortunate.
I know, right? Anyway, so I could see that happening. I think if anyone's going to be a surprise, I think it's going to be in the East. I think South Carolina could take advantage of the rest of the East. Like Kentucky not being as good, maybe Missouri struggling from the sanctions, all that sort of stuff. I think South Carolina could be a surprise team to maybe actually do what people think they should do a lot of times and actually be a top 3, maybe top 2 team in the East. So I think if anyone's going to be a surprisingly good team this year, I think it would be South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me trying to be different, I guess.
It's fair.
Yeah. All right, guys, we got to make some predictions real quick to round out this awful podcast.
I got the odds, baby.
Keith, I don't know if they've got any spreads set for the games this week, but if you want to
do.
Oh, okay. All right. Then never mind. We're good to go. I'm going to read out the matchups. Of course, most of these are non-conference, and then you randomly have Georgia and Vanderbilt because sure, why not? And we're just going to try to get through these things to wrap things up. If you're new to the podcast, 2 things we always do when we make our predictions is we always predict Florida State, so we can say that we're always talking about the Noles. And we always pick one random matchup to predict. And I think I'm real proud of the one I picked for this week. I hope you guys like it as well. But let's start off with Texas State traveling to College Station to play Texas A&M to open things up. Is there a spread for this one, Keith?
A&M is a early 33.5 point favorite.
All right. Go Aggies. 33.5.
Yeah, A&M covers.
Yeah. I see no reason to disagree with you on that one, Keith.
Same.
Yeah. All right. Ole Miss at Memphis. Wow, Ole Miss at Memphis to start the season?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
This is weird.
Interesting.
Memphis is a 5.5 point favorite.
Wait, so people still think Memphis is going to be all right this year?
Yep.
Interesting.
I don't understand it.
I don't understand it either. I know they've been okay for a couple of years.
Those games are also super weird all the time.
Yeah, that part's true. Chandler, who do you think?
I think Ole Miss is going to win. I think that the running backs are going to be really, really good. You've got Scotty Phillips coming back; he's healthy. You've got Snoop Connor, who I think has been the surprise of the offseason. He's a 3-star recruit from Hattiesburg, but he got there in the spring, and he has been a solid contributor. And then you've got your home run hitter in Jaren Ely. And I think the biggest key is going to be Matt Corral keeping his head. And I mean that figuratively and literally. Mm-hmm. Figuratively in the sense that the last time we saw him, he was throwing punches in the end zone. And so he's got to stay calm. And literally the offensive line's got to protect him. But I think if Ole Miss can manage that, if Ole Miss can manage that part of it well, I think Phillips and the other two will run them to victory. And I don't believe in Memphis at all. I mean, they were not great last year, and then they lost a couple of guys to the NFL. So I don't understand where the Memphis hype is coming from right now. I mean, they may prove me wrong, and even if they beat Ole Miss, I don't think that means that they're going to be like some great team. So I just don't believe in Memphis.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't really see that. It's going to be an interesting game. I think it has the potential to either be like one of those classic early in the season and the two teams haven't really figured out who they are yet, so it's weirdly high scoring games, or it's two teams that haven't figured out who they are yet, so it's weirdly low scoring games. But I think it still goes Ole Miss's favor either way.
I think as bad as both of these defenses are, there's no way it's a low scoring game.
I know it's got to be high score. You're absolutely right. All right, Keith.
Give me Ole Miss.
I will. Thank you for asking for that so politely. All right. As always, we've got needlessly neutral site games to play at the beginning of the year. And they're always in totally like asinine locations, such as Mississippi State against Louisiana. That's who they are now. They're not Louisiana Lafayette. They're Louisiana. The Raging Cajuns in the Superdome. Why is that got to be a neutral site? Who knows? But they're playing each other there. Keith, what's the spread?
Their storied rivalry has been very violent.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand it. State's 21-point favorite.
21.
Interesting that they went 21. Yeah.
Yeah. Chandler?
I don't know anything about Louisiana Lafayette, so I'll say State.
They're just Louisiana, Chandler.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just catch up to 2019 with us, buddy.
State's going to win. State's going to win easily, but I don't know if it'll be by 21.
Yeah, I'm going to go final score Mississippi State 20, Louisiana nothing. That's so
Could
that,
happen.
Seems like a solid guess.
Could
Yeah,
happen.
I think MSU, but not covering, or if they do, like right at. There's no way. Anyway, Keith.
Give me State,
I will.
please.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
got it. Another stupid neutral site, kind of, is South Carolina playing North Carolina in Charlotte.
Mhm.
All right. What's the spread there, Keith?
South Carolina's an 8-point favorite.
All right, Chandler.
Do you guys know who North Carolina's new offensive coordinator is?
No, I only know their head coach. Who is their offensive coordinator?
Bo Dallas.
Their offensive coordinator is one Philip Longo.
Mm.
And if there's one thing that I know about Phil Longo offenses is that they don't score on SEC teams. So give me South Carolina covering.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I'm right there with you. South Carolina to cover. Keith.
South Carolina.
All right, Georgia State and Tennessee play each other.
And if one of us is wrong, we're all going down.
Yeah, I know, right? That's how it is the beginning of the season, though. You know,
Yeah.
like it's just who else are you going to pick? All right, Georgia State and Tennessee.
Tennessee's a 26-point favorite.
Yeah, Tennessee by whatever.
Yep. No reason to say otherwise, Keith.
Yep.
Unanimous. All right, Alabama and Cutcliffe play each other in Atlanta.
Fighting Cutcliffes.
That's all it is. Keith, what's the spread on this one?
Alabama is a 1 million-point favorite.
Okay, I'm
Alabama,
writing that down.
Alabama by 1 million.
Yeah, I will take.
Yep.
I will take the points.
No questions asked. Up until today, I did not know Portland State had a football team, but they're playing Arkansas to open things up. So good on them. I'm going to assume there's no spread on this one because Portland State would not be
It's not even on the list at all.
Yeah,
They aren't playing the game.
All right. So we're not going to talk about it.
Arkansas.
Yeah, I didn't make this up, right? Like, yeah, there it is, Portland State.
Yeah.
So
Arkansas.
yeah, Arkansas all around. Here, all right, let's jump to Georgia Southern and LSU while we're here talking about these types of matchups.
LSU and their redesigned RPO offense is a 28-point favorite.
Chandler,
Of course, Georgia Southern is an SEC slayer.
it's true. It's what they do. Chandler, who you got?
I'm sorry. Which game is this? I'm sorry.
Georgia Southern and LSU.
Oh, yeah, LSU.
I think LSU, but do not cover the spread.
I actually agree with that.
Missouri, for whatever reason, has to travel to Wyoming to play football.
Schedules. Missouri is a 17.5-point favorite.
Wow, 17.5. Chandler?
Missouri. And
I-
covering.
I agree.
Mizzou.
Yep. All right. Let's get into the only actual SEC matchup of the week in Georgia and Vanderbilt.
Georgia is somehow only a 20.5 favorite.
Huh. Chandler?
I mean, I think Georgia can name their score.
Right. Whatever you want. You got it, Bulldogs.
Yeah. This is a non-conference game.
Yep. And then the only interesting matchup out of the SEC here is Auburn and Oregon in Arlington, Texas.
So maybe it's location, but Auburn is right now they're a 3.5-point favorite.
Auburn, interesting. All right. Chandler?
The team with no offense.
Yep.
Auburn is a 3.5-point favorite. I want to pick Oregon, but I don't believe in Justin Herbert. And so I think that Auburn is gonna win.
Okay. This is where we're going to actually disagree. I do believe in Justin Herbert, and I'm going Oregon to win this game. Keith?
This reminds me a lot of last year where Washington and Auburn played, and Washington probably should have beat them by like 14 and didn't for some reason.
And it ruined Washington's season.
Yep.
Like they never recovered.
Nope. I mean, when you lost to that team, it's impossible to actually recover. I'm gonna stick with the SEC out of conference history and go Auburn.
All right, there we go. All right, 2 more to round things out. As mentioned, we always talk about the Noles. The Noles welcome Boise State down to Tallahassee for an opening season matchup.
About the Noles.
I know that's gonna be a pretty interesting one, actually. So, Keith, we got a spread on this thing?
Mm-hmm. Indefensibly, they are a 5.5 point favorite.
Florida State is?
Yes.
I assumed, but I just needed to check.
Dang,
I know.
Man, not even a touchdown favorite at home.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. Chandler, you got to pick, though, and who you got?
Man, give me the Broncos.
Oh, I love it. I'm right with you. Keith?
I think they're keyed up. I think they're keyed up to do it, and don't think Florida State's any good.
I'm with you. No disagreement here.
Indefensibly, I'm going to pick the Noles.
Hey, I mean, you got to pick different at some point, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you know. Although I do want to point out that, like, I made it through 8 weeks last season, correctly predicting Florida State's schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It might have even been more than that. I predicted their schedule almost flawlessly. It was
I think you got one game wrong the whole year. It was odd.
Oh, it's just strange. So who knows? This is probably the year where I get all of them wrong. All right, the random matchup of the week that we're going to predict is involving everyone's favorite football head coach, now the head coach at Liberty, Hugh Freeze. Number 22, Syracuse.
Not actually the coach right now, though, taking a leave of absence for apparently a near fatal case of staph infection.
Right? How crazy is that? The man actually had a life-threatening infection and everything. So, yikes. But number 22, Syracuse, goes to Lynchburg. They're in Lynchburg, Virginia, to play against Liberty. First of all, Syracuse preseason ranked. Good on you, Q's.
Mm-hmm.
Let's all join in the traditional Syracuse cheer of "Oh my God, Q's in the house, Q's in the house, oh my God."
It's because the city and state of New York does not have air conditioning.
Nope.
In the house. They'll fit right in Virginia. All right.
Syracuse
right.
is a 17.5 point favorite.
17.5. There you go. Chandler?
I think that Liberty just doesn't have the talent at all, and Hugh Freeze sucks, and Dino Babers rules. So give me Syracuse, but not covering.
I think Syracuse by 30. Keith?
Yeah, give me Hughes and the points.
Cool. There we go. If we ever hear from Roe, then on this week, then we will get his predictions as well. But here's what you guys can do is you can tweet at us at ROTC Sports on Twitter. Tell us who you think. Tell us what you think we got wrong or right on this episode. Tell us who you think is your surprise team or your collapse team, whatever it may be. As well, if you happen to be one of the guys that's tuning in to our YouTube posts whenever we post these episodes on YouTube, first of all, thank you. That's awesome. Secondly, our content, of course, always goes out to our podcast itself. So if you want to jump in on any of that and listen to any of that, you can find us on iTunes, on Google Play, any Spotify. We're definitely on there. Anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, Running Out the Clock is there. We would appreciate it if you subscribed, liked, shared posts, whatever it may be, on wherever it is that you are watching, listening, tuning in, however it is. We thank you for that. We're excited about this season. Actually, I'm not. I can't lie about that. I'm not excited about college football.
I am no longer excited about the season.
But we are here regardless. Join us as we suffer through the 2019-2020 college football season. 150 years of the misery known as college football. God bless the sport. God bless amateurism. May it rain. I'm your friend Joseph Craven. That's Keith Harkins. That's Chandler Rowland. Chandler, sign us off.
Rigmarole.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.